This one comes to us via Patreon from Leah. And Leah says, Dawn, I have always been obsessed with Elizabeth Bathory, a countess or something from Hungary who killed a bunch of girls in her castle and then bathed in their blood. Was she the first serial killer, a witch, a vampire? I can't wait to hear your take, Leah. Oh, that's a good HILF. A gore fest set inside a Transylvanian castle. Yeah, yes, please. I'm going to start by taking you to the scene of the crime because yuck. And the way in which her crimes were first revealed is itself totally dramatic. It's 1612. Castle in Slovenia, and a Lutheran minister comes to town and goes to this guy named Thurzo, who is the Countess's cousin, okay? And he's like, hi guys. So, I've been getting some very unsettling reports of some spooky shit that your cousin's up to. I'd like you to go up to her castle, unannounced if you don't mind, and just take a little look-see around. When Thurzo opens the door and walks in, he sees, quote, one girl exsanguinate on the table. Exsanguinate means drained of blood. Then nearby, another girl perforated. That'd be full of holes, okay? Elizabeth herself is in flagrati of the crime. That would mean she's in the middle of doing some spooky shit. They then find a dungeon full of living but mangled girls, and underneath the castle, about 50 corpses. It's bad, okay? And that's you and me. We're like, that's bad. Do you know how bad it really had to be, though, for these cunts to think it was bad? Guys, we're talking Middle Ages, man. We're talking 1612. This is technically the Renaissance, but boy, howdy, did we all just spend a lot of time in the Middle Ages, aka the Dark Ages. Not a great time for reading, not a great time for medicine, not a great time for justice. Lots of ways to die, dark plagues, and all the wars, and you stub your toe and you die slowly over the course of like 3 months. The bloodbath death march that has always been pregnancy and childbirth. I mean, man, there were a lot of ways to die, and they all sucked. And, by the way, just torturing and murdering peasants on behalf of the nobility, that's not a big deal. That doesn't bother us at all. We've been doing that forever. In fact, not long before this whole thing took place, there had been the Peasants' Uprising. Boy, they came down hard on the peasants, particularly this guy Gregory, who was allegedly in charge of it. Friends, when Gregory is caught for the Peasants' Uprising, they tie him to a chair. They force a white, hot crown onto his head. While he's tied up to the throne, they have him watch while they chop his younger brother to pieces. And then when that's done, they cut little pieces off of him and feed his body to his troops. And they have to eat it. Otherwise, they get beat up and murdered themselves. And then, while still living, they burn him. Okay? The people who did that were looking at what happened in Elizabeth's castle and went, oh my God, you are a brutal bitch. How do we know, Dawn, what her crimes were and that they were that bad? Well, because there was a trial. Now, I know it's 1612, but they took notes we can read, and they took witness statements. They had hearings and shit, and oh my sweet Jesus, listen to this. Elizabeth did a lot of this dark shit, but she had help. 4 of Elizabeth's servants are also perpetrators. Apparently, everyone else in the castle, all the other staff, were victims to some extent. Maybe not murdered, maybe just not murdered yet, but all of them tortured and abused in various dark and terrible ways, okay? Head count of victims total over the 8-ish years that she was really active, 120 victims, 30 to 50 of which are attributed to Elizabeth herself. Most of these murders took place there in her castle, but apparently the Countess had something of an addiction because when she would travel, weddings, meetings, various things, she'd bring a girl or two along just to slice them up in the wagon on the way where they were going. Kind of like a roadie for us Wisconsinites. And this is also part of the reason why she got caught, because it was while she was out and about with these gals that they occasionally would escape, which is how our Lutheran minister got this story to begin with. Who were they killing up there in that castle? Well, staff, mostly. She'd go through the local village resources of young girls and unmarried women. And once she went through those, she'd go through the friends and family of the villagers and reaching out sort of Ghislaine Maxwell style. Who else can you bring in? And then when she ran out of folks from that pool, she had the idea to open what's called a gynoeceum, which sounds like a lot of fun, not gonna lie. Like gynecologist mixed with a gymnasium? Please, where do I sign? And it is kind of that, right? It is for women to learn how to be better women. It was designed to appeal to the lower gentry, which means above the peasants, but still below Liz herself. And it's where you'd go to learn, languages, dances, etiquette, which fork to use, rich people shit. But then these girls started dying too. And the difference between these rich kids and the peasants is that the families come asking, what the fuck, man? And the first ones, Liz was like, oh, yes, very sad. What happened was one of the girls is a crazy murderer, killed your daughter, so sad. But don't worry, the murderer is also dead. Then the next family was like, what happened to our daughter? And they were like, right, malaria. Malaria got that one. And I was like, well, can we have her body back? And she was like, ooh, that'd be complicated. So no. This starts to add up. So how'd she do it? Dawn, give us all the details. Okay. First, several victims, kind of old school, starved them, tied them up, beat them to death. She cut some of their hands off with scissors, burned branded fingers pulled out. The particularly colorful ones included smothering a girl with honey and then leaving her outside to be devoured by bugs and rodents. Another girl was sat naked in a tub of water and left out overnight to slowly freeze to death. And the punishments doled out to anyone who tried to aid one of these girls was promised to be even worse. The bathing in blood. This has been depicted in two different ways. One has her in a tub full of blood. Pretty straightforward. The other has her sitting in a chair underneath a cage full of spikes. Deal is, girl gets sat in there, spikes, and sort of flash dance style. Youthful shower. Mm-hmm. The verdict. At the end of this trial, surprise, guilty. Those four servants, they have their fingers all pulled out with white-hot pincers, and then they're burned alive, which seems fair. I don't know. Am I wrong? One of the perpetrators, I guess, was found less guilty, and he was killed and then burned while dead. And then one of them was actually acquitted. One of the servants who had been accused, they found, had actually only been doing this torture because she herself was being tortured. So, kind of a nice ecosystem they had built there. Now, what about the Countess herself, right? Also found guilty, which is crazy. But you can't treat these noble people the same. They don't get the same punishments. So this cousin, Thurzo, the same one who had gone up to her castle and found her in the first place, was like, we don't want to risk any embarrassment to the family. Okay. So instead of taking her away to jail, let's do what they call perpetuus incarceribus. No, perpetuus carceribus. Perpetuus carceribus, which means, right, perpetual jail. You can't, house arrest. we'll just lock her up in the castle. She won't be allowed to leave. Now, technically what you're supposed to do is make an actual jail, a room with no windows that you serve food through like it is a jail. But apparently, she does live wandering free throughout the castle until the end of her life. Is the Countess Elizabeth Bathory the inspiration for Dracula? You probably noticed some of the connection, right? Transylvania, castle, drinking blood, draining blood, bathing in blood, like, right? There is no evidence Bram Stoker references this story anywhere in his list of bibliographies and stuff like that. But I don't know, man. It happened 200 years before he wrote the book. And I mean, once you hear this story, it is awfully hard to forget. Sleep tight.